academies that there were in the Sephardic country 1900s. Also here we are in the 2000s. Today I'm going to speak about the Alliance Israelite Universelle, also known as Kol Israel Xaberim. This it was a massive, it ended up becoming like a huge school network system, pretty much in many parts of the Sephardic world. Now I would say on the onset, it wasn't necessarily seen as a more on the religious spectrum. It was definitely more of a secularized school, let's just say, in of itself. This was reported over some reports in of itself, but it would have a huge impact on many of the different communities, all over the various different Sephardic communities from a secular point of view. Also, many of people would feel from a religious point of view, necessarily. So it could be that, let's explore within regards to this. I think it would be irresponsible not to speak about this very big school network in this series over here. Now, it was a Paris-based international Jewish organization. It was founded back in the year 1860. Their purpose was to safeguard human rights for Jews around the world. Now, I do think they got involved on many occasions when there was issues with Jewish people in various Jewish communities in diaspora. When people were in trouble, they were there to help also. So within regards to human rights, they were doing works all throughout. I'm just reading Wikipedia description about it. It promotes the ideals of Jewish self-defense and self-sufficiency through education and professional development. So it was more of a language school, as you can see. The organization is noted for establishing French language schools for Jewish children throughout the Mediterranean, Iran, and Ottoman Empire, especially in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Now, we visited, I think, the building of the Alliance in Jerusalem. I think it's very near Agrippa Street, if I'm not mistaken. It was founded, I think, 1860. 165 years ago. Its purpose states humanitarian. Headquarters were in Paris, and the official language was either French. I'm not sure if it initially was Hebrew or not, but obviously it was a Jewish school in of itself, and the president happened to be a man of name Mark Eisenberg, I believe it was. So the motto of the organization is the Jewish rabbinic injunction called Kol Israel Xaberim Ze Leze. We're translated in French, we're not going to say the French translation, or in English, is all Jews are responsible for one another. That's our motto over here. Now that's interesting. In 1860, it embarked on a mission of civil sacrifice to advance the Jewish people of the Middle East through the French education and culture. It was founded by name, a person with the name Jules Carvello, Isidore Cohen, Narcisse Levin, who was secretary, I think, of someone named Adolphe Crémieux, and Elie Artis Astruc, I hope I pronounced their names correctly, and Eugene, I think this is May 1860 in Paris it was, and opened its first school in Tétouan in Morocco in 1860. We've spoken about the Tétouan community. There are various different rabbanim there. The original members of the society were Jews, and by far the largest number of its members belong obviously to the Jewish faith, but the association had enjoyed, let's say, some cooperation with many prominent Christians also. So it wasn't, so you could see at that point in time, many of these areas where they would come inside were very Torah orientated and on a very high religious level. So some of the Rabbonim were not that for at a later stage when they would try and open the school systems in those places particularly. Now, as outlined, I'm just reading Wikipedia here, in its prospectus, the program of the society included the emancipation of Jews from oppressive and discriminatory laws, political disabilities, and defense of them in those countries where they were subjugated to persecution. So for the attainment of its objectives, they proposed to carry on a campaign of education. This was through the press and by publication of works on the history and life of the Jews. In the beginning, the course of action adopted by the society of bringing relief to their oppressed brethren in other countries was to secure, let's say, the intersection of friendly governments on their behalf. I think as early as 1867, when governments of France, Italy, Belgium, and Netherlands made the renewal of existing treaties with Switzerland, conditional upon the countries granting full civil and political rights to the Jews. 1878, representatives of the Alliance laid the condition of the Jews in the Balkan Peninsula before the Congress of Berlin. As a result of this treaty, stipulated that in Romania, Serbia, and Bulgaria, no discrimination should be made against any religion in the distribution of civil rights. Now, obviously, over the time period, the activity of Alliance became more focused on education and especially on improving the welfare of the Jews. 2 years after the first school was opened, I think in Tétouan, It would open in Baghdad, another school, in 1864. Then someone in 1870, Charles Nettie, was a founding member of the Alliance Israelite Universelle, received a tract of land from the Ottoman Empire as a gift and opened a school called Israel Agricultural School, the first of network of Jewish schools before the establishment of the State of Israel. Now, I think it was actually, there was a Rabbi Ragusa from Ragusa, I can't remember his name, that would actually help with opening up. He was a rabbinic figure, if I'm not mistaken. At the beginning, he was a great rabbi. I actually know I'm familiar with direct descendants of him in of itself, respectively. Now, I think at that stage in time, over 60 alliance schools operated in the Ottoman, Middle East, Iran, and North Africa, providing Jewish children with poor families with formal elementary and vocational training. Many of the teachers were educated at alliance teacher training schools in Turkey and France. Now, we spoke about, I think, a rabbinic school in Turkey at one stage in time that was opened some point in the latter part of the 1800s. Now, the alliance founded a free school in Jerusalem in 1868. It was followed by the Mikveh Yisrael, a school in Jaffa in 1870. 1882, there was a school for boys, was established in Jerusalem. Amin al-Husani was one of their pupils. The original building on Jaffa Road was demolished, I think, after 1967. In 1903, the Zionist group called the B'nai Moshe was to be given a grant to open a school, but the funding was withdrawn due to Ben Moshe's insistence that lessons should be in the Hebrew language. Okay, but I think at a later stage they will do it in Hebrew language, if I'm not mistaken, but I'll have to double check that. The following year, the Alliance donated a property, which later became Neve Tzedek, or girls, and the Gymnasia Herzliya boys schools. In 1906, Alliance operated a secondary school for girls in Jerusalem. So they've reached now Yerushalayim, very much in Eretz Israel. So it's interesting. By 1900, Alliance Israelite Universelle was operating schools with a combined student population of 26,000. Remember, we spoke about another more recent, more religious Torah network schools in this series, or Tzahar Torah School Network, which I recommend everyone to watch at one stage in time. I've got this on my channel also. Now, the greatest efforts were concentrated for the Alliance School in Morocco, Tunisia, and Turkey. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there was an area in Tunisia where the Rabbanim would, where it was a very religious area, would protest against the school system being placed in, I can't remember which city it was in itself, but as I stated before, it wasn't necessarily promoting Torah and necessarily Jewish Torah outreach in of itself. It was more concentrated on human rights, the languages, so on and so forth. After decades of teaching in French exclusively, the schools would then begin teaching in Hebrew to their students after the 11th Zionist Congress insisted, amidst the modern revival of Hebrew language, to be included in curriculum. 1912, the Alliance had 71 schools for boys and 44 for girls, with schools now in Baghdad, Jerusalem, Tangier, Istanbul, Beirut, Cairo, Damascus, Salonika. For Jewish people, let's say, if they wanted a more modern education, this was a provider over there. And I think there was also Macedonia and various other places also. I think a 1930 report found that there were 10 Jewish schools in Baghdad educating 7,182 children. And now it's reported over 2 of them were run by the Alliance Israelite Universelle. The boys' school had originally been the David Sassoon School, founded in 1865. Albert Sassoon, another person we spoke about in the series, had given it to the Alliance in 1874. That contained 475 boys. 4 languages were taught at that point in time: Hebrew, Arabic, French, and English. There were classes in the sciences, geography, and history. All were taught in French except for the moral and religious studies, which were in Hebrew. Okay, so Alliance School for Girls was established by someone called Eli Kaduri, with 1,177 students and with a similar syllabus. As a result of the influence of the French language schools, Judeo-Spanish acquired many neologisms from French, respectively. So we've said over here. If I'm not mistaken, there was opposition in many of the places. For example, the Ben Ishchai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Baghdad was a really great rabbi in Iraq. He wasn't necessarily for the school systems itself. There was a strong Torah education system over there with a Midrash Bet Zilka and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of politics with rabbis in different places over there. We do see that for many of these school systems, granted, yes, many of them the graduates become rabbis in many different cities, but not necessarily the high level of Torah education was passed down, you could argue, in some aspects over here. That's just for debate. Alliance, I think, will continue to operate dozens of schools and education programs in Israel today. Historic schools include Alliance High School in Tel Aviv, Alliance Israelite Universelle High School in Haifa, someone named Rene Cassin High School, and a conservative high school in Jerusalem. And obviously now we're going outside the Orthodox sphere over here, it's conservative. So we can see, once again, this is just a demonstration that it's not necessarily Torah, trying to make people Orthodox Torah strong Jews, that according to that argument. Now the network includes, they do other various important works. You can see there's a school for the deaf people in Jerusalem, which is very, very important, which helping deaf students. And actually, it does spring out not just for Jewish people, but also Arab people, also people with maybe suffering from physical disabilities and mental disabilities. So that very important work they're doing over there. And they would study together. There's also a Mikveh Israel Youth Village, operates a state high school, a state religious high school specializing in life and natural sciences, environmental science, biotechnology, and a French Israel high school established in 2007 as a joint initiative of the Israeli and French governments. Now the schools in Turkey, I think they would actually reach Turkey to a great degree. Now, when French medium schools operated by Alliance Israelite Universelle opened in the 1860s, the position of, let's say, Judeo-Spanish Ladino began to weaken in Ottoman Empire areas. So it would have an effect on Ladino. And Judeo-Spanish was not used as a language of instruction in any time in history and was instead acquired through families. Therefore, Hebrew was perceived as ethnic instruction language for Jewish people, used for religious reasons. In time, Judeo-Spanish became perceived as a low-status language, so people avoided learning it. Judeo-Spanish language and culture, let's say, declined, and in 2017, someone named Melis Alfan described Judeo-Spanish as dying in Turkey. Now, what was the impact it had on girls over here? It would change and shape the roles and opportunities for women in North Africa. Before the establishment, let's say, of the AIU, primarily girls from wealthy or rabbinical families received an education. Literacy and skill training provided an opportunity, let's say, for more upward social mobility, especially to Jewish girls of underprivileged backgrounds now, and could not attain an education previously. There was featuring foundational maths, arithmetic, exposure to European subjects, European geography and French language. Girls would receive vocational training in fields such as needlework, sewing, bookkeeping, secretarial work, laboratory assistant and industrial chemistry. It promoted, let's say, economic independence of Jewish women in the region. Many North African women were also educated and trained as AIU teachers in France, returning thereafter to their countries of origin to teach. So they would learn. It was a system perpetuating. Along with economic change, the AIU changed cultural norms for Jewish girls in Maghreb as well. I think the AIU would lobby to extend the typical marriage age from 12 to 15 by 1948. And there was a changing role of women. That's controversy, let's say, regarding secularization of Jewish society through Western-style education. As stated before, this will have an impact maybe on the religious levels of many of the people, and we're exploring the history of great rabbis of yesteryear, and we do see that many people from the Alliance school networks, many of the descendants might not have been as religious as the people that might have been in the more yeshivish school systems also. So it did have that effect the other way around, you could also say, which we have to point out. Other importances, let's just say, the AIU, and more generally the French colonization of swaths of North Africa, shifted education from hands of rabbis and religious leaders to secular. And we see many of the rabbis in many of these countries would not be so happy with the Alliance school system. Even when they were teaching them, some of them would leave at some stages of time. They felt like, there was a religion in some aspects was being compromised to a great degree, many of the rabbis did. And we've spoken about this on various different biography videos of rabbis also. European instructors. In Algeria, the shift resulted in a legal mandate. In 1845, a law required Jews of Algeria to be registered in French schools and to only attend a religious school as a supplement. Although the AIU did teach both secular and religious subjects such as Hebrew and biblical history, religious leaders would still question and lamented the secularization. As we stated before, there was many rabbis in these countries. I think the AIU attempted to secularize the Jewish legal systems even in North Africa. That's how far it went. Before colonization, Jews in Morocco operated their legal system according to halakha. In 1913, the AIU appealed to the French government to try the indigenous Jewish inhabitants in French court instead of rabbinical tribunals. So religiously, it would, maybe many of the people would say, cause damage over here. Political influence there was also. It used its power to advocate the political assimilation of Maghrebi Jews into French society. AIU instructors were instrumental in the movement of naturalization for educated Moroccan Jews. Who were the presidents? There was someone with the name Louis Jean Koningswater, I think from 1860 to 1863. Adolphe Crémieux from 1863 to 1867. Solomon Monk from 1867 to 18... I think it was that year itself. Then Adolphe Crémieux would come back between 1868 to 1880. Solomon Hayum Goldschmidt, 1898, Narcisse Levin, 1898 to 1915. Arnold Netter would be 5 years to 1920. Then Sylvain Levy, 1920 to 1935. Arnold Netter, 1936. Georges Levin till 1941. René Cassin, 1943 to 1976, one longer running presidents. Jules Brunswick, 1976 to 1985. Adolphe Steg, 1985 to 2011. I think Mark Eisenberg currently since 2011 who was let's say some of the alumni over here. Someone, an Israeli pop singer, let's just say Din Aviv, Gal Mekel, another basketball player from the NBA. And we're talking about rabbis over here. So there was David Alliance. They weren't rabbis, but we're going to talk about the rabbis in a minute. For example, David Alliance, who became a very successful British-Iranian businessman. And the former leader of Iran's Jewish community, Harun Yeshai, he was a graduate also, a Jewish spy of the name Avshalom Weinberg. And Rav Shalom Assas, a famous Moroccan rabbi, I think Rav Shalom Assas, if I'm not mistaken, would become a chief rabbi of Jerusalem, and we actually recorded a video of that. Sephardi chief rabbi of Jerusalem also, so he would become also a famous alumni there. And Jewish educator David Cassis, I think another famous person was Sassoon Eskel, an Iraqi statesman. Naaman Belkind was a Jewish spy also. And Rabbi Chaim Musa Dweck, last chief rabbi of Egypt, we'll speak about him in a minute. There was a Jack M. Sassoon, who was a Jewish studies teacher. And there was also Rabbi Vitalis Danon, who was a rabbi and a poet also. Let's speak a bit about Rabbi Chaim Musa Dweck. He was a graduate of the school system, let's say. He was born in 1905. He passed away August 21st, 1974. He was the last chief rabbi of Egypt, it's reported over. He was born into a Kohanim family in Anteb in Turkey, I think on the border of Syria. He was the eldest child of Rabbi Musa Haim Dweck and Zarifa Harari. When he was 5 years of age, he moved to Cairo, the family. Obviously, he attended the Alliance Israelite Universelle and the Jewish Studies program Keter Torah after school, reported over. He was part of the great yeshiva Keter Torah in Cairo between 1918 and 1933. He would learn under Rabbi Chaim Nachum and Rabbi Yosef Pinto. Rabbi Chaim Nachum was a chief rabbi at the time. He would receive rabbinic ordination in 1933. He was one of the founders of well-known Ahava synagogue, I think, and considered was very, very interesting. He would teach Torah to students, including various famous people. I think Rabbi Maurice Stein, who became the chief rabbi of Lille in France, Joseph Hayon, chief rabbi of Barranquilla, Colombia, Rabbi Masoud El-Az, who became the chief rabbi of Sudan, for example, and also Joseph Hamoy, another great rabbi, he was become also, and Rabbi Halfon Sabdia, the rabbi of Abba in Brooklyn, so various different rabbis. And I think Rabbi Dweck was appointed by the chief rabbi, Rabbi Chaim Nachum Effendi, to join the rabbinical body of Cairo's chief rabbinate. And he would be appointed the chairman of the Bet Din over there, and was also appointed the Egyptian Ministry of Justice as a judge in the primary courts and himself respectively. And he took on various different important roles. I think in September 1956, he was appointed as the deputy chief rabbi to Rabbi Chaim Nachum Effendi, who recommended that Rabbi Chaim Dweck would succeed him as a chief rabbi of Egypt. I think when Rabbi Nachum passed away in 1960, Rabbi Dweck would become the chief rabbi over there. At that point in time, there was 10,000 people, I think, living there. And he continued to preside over the community that was gradually, let's say, emptying out of Egypt as they made their way to Israel, United States, and other countries. And I think come 1967, during the Six-Day War, Rabbi Dweck and his family were ordered to go to offices of the chief rabbinate, where they were held on house arrest for 2 weeks without outside contact, and then it obviously fizzled out from there. Another famous person, graduate, is Jack M. Sassoon, a Jewish educator. He taught Jewish studies, Hebrew Bible at the Vanderbilt Divinity School. He was a professor of classics at Vanderbilt University, another famous, let's say, academic, let's just say, in itself. And I think he was born himself in 1941. He's another in Aleppo in Syria. Another one is Rabbi Vitalis Danon. He was born in 1897, passed away on June 1st, 1969. He was a Jewish Tunisian writer and a professor. He was notable for day-to-day Jewish Tunisian life in his book Ninet de Leroux du Péché. I think he was director of the Alliance school network that was in Sfax in Tunisia. It's reported over. From 1921 to 1926, he was director of Tunisia's largest Alliance school. I think that was in École de la Hafsia, if I'm not mistaken. And in 1929, he co-authored the book Lahara, I think, with Raphael Levy, if I'm not mistaken. 1933 to 1934, he published another book. And 1938, he published his most successful book, the Ninet de Leroux du Péché. I think 1954 and 1955, he published 2 volumes of Petite Histoire de Juris and more books. And he was a director of the Alliance schools between 1954 to 1960. So they had many school systems all throughout. And there was other rabbis that will make their marks in their industry respectively all throughout their time. Many people become successful teachers from the school system. And, many people... it's actually interesting because nowadays there's obviously a huge teshuvah movement in Israel. Many people are balei teshuvah in Israel, especially since Israel all over the world. So many of these grandparents or great-great-grandparents would have learned in an Alliance school system, and many of the great-great-grandchildren will even be learning in kollels now and stuff, and will be prominent rabbis now in their respective places, respectively. So you could say that the long-term impact, there was a lot of rabbis came out from families that were educated there, but once again, it was the main school system, the Alliance school system was in Israel all through, not just in Israel, all throughout the North African countries at that point in time. Obviously there was other school networks that were all over the place. Otsar HaTorah would open once again, I think it had huge French influence. They would open in France, in Morocco, in Iran, in various different North African countries and Asian countries. That would be like, let's just say, the Otsar HaTorah was a much more religious school, also maybe with a bit of secular studies, if I'm not mistaken. But Alliance school network was a very, very huge one, and they did a huge amount of human rights works, and they did various different importances. From that, but there was a lot of opposition from the rabbis, and let's just say there was a secularization, and it did compromise in many aspects the Torah level of learning over there. Now there were rabbinic seminaries about at that point in time. I think they were connected somehow to the rabbinical seminary that was in Turkey, and we've spoken about that before. I think that was headed by a Rabbi Abraham Danon, if I'm not mistaken, that operated in the 1800s. There was a famous rabbinical college, I think also in Padua. I'm not too sure if that was connected to Alliance itself, or there was like a connection or dialogue between them. It could be there was over there at that point in time, so we have to point that out. Also, I think that was actually started up by Rabbi Shmuel Lazarto, also popularly known as the Shadal. He was, I think, the great-nephew of Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lazarto, who was the Ramchal, respectively. There was other rabbinic seminaries that I think will open in Bosnia. I'm not too sure how connected it was. Also, if there was connection or affiliation with it somehow. There was also in Rhodes in Greece. So maybe some of the rabbis over there would overlap. And the Alliance would be, I think, in contact, obviously, with people in prominent positions in the land of Israel at various stages of time. And they had to be at that point in time. Remember, in Israel, in Jerusalem itself, especially in the 1800s, early 1900s, there was a chief rabbi of Jerusalem that was representative really of as a chief rabbi, let's say, of Eretz Israel in itself respectively. So many of the chief rabbis would be in dialogue also with the school system. So obviously it was a very, very famous school network system, and it will leave its mark not just, let's just say, on education, on Hebrew education itself and Jewish education. It will politically and internationally with different political figures, and it will really, really make their mark. Now, I'm not too sure. I think the Mikveh Yisrael school was obviously started up by Alliance, but I don't think it was maybe the same school. I'm not too sure what the actual syllabus of the Mikveh Israel school was in of itself. But there are places, as I said before, I've got a good friend that is a direct descendant, I think, of the Mikveh Yisrael school. And it was obviously a famous place of its time. It's still doing works. We actually visited outside the Alliance Israelite Universelle building, which is based in Jerusalem, I think on Agrippa Street. We went outside there and just did a bit of filming over there, which we have to point out also. Now, I think Alliance Israelite Universelle, we have to also acknowledge that on this channel over here we record a lot of biography videos of famous rabbis of yesteryear, and a lot of times we take some of the information we see when we're exploring about various different great rabbonim. They have a website where they commemorate and write biography, a mini biography, where I think they bring about sources of other famous rabbis when it's their Hilula. Many of these rabbis were connected at one stage in time to the Alliance school system, and they would also relate to various different, let's say, many important religious Zionistic figures. Also, they would write inside the website. That website is a Hayomi website. I'm not sure the exact website address, but they have maybe biographies of possibly 2,000-3,000 plus rabbis from the Sephardi countries, mostly Ottoman countries, Asian, Spanish. They will go really into all those different communities in of itself, respectively. They have like many biographies, and many occasions we have used their information because there's not much available also about the great Chachamim of yesteryear. So they will, the website itself does include many biographies of famous rabbanim, and that has to be acknowledged also. Now, there were other famous rabbis that will make their mark in different areas also. We mentioned only a few today, but there were other rabbis also, so we have to point that out also. And yeah, it was a famous school system. This is just a few highlights, my own few words. You know, someone else would record a video about Alliance, they might say something totally different. They might not, so I don't know that much information about the place itself. I'm just using a bit of documented information on the school system respectively over here, and wishing you well, friends. We're a community here. What we do on this channel is, at the moment, we are trying to not just explore different school systems, different yeshivot there were in the Sephardic countries, different yeshivot there are nowadays in the Sephardic countries, populations itself. We also do a lot of biography videos of great Chachamim of yesteryear. We try and explore who were the famous rabbis of yesteryear, and we try and speak about them in great detail. We've recorded already about 1,250 mini biographies of great rabbis from the various different Sephardic Ottoman countries and those different places. So we're trying to find out the science. We're trying to look at what were the different rabbinical colleges there were, especially in 1800s and 1900s or earlier. That's another thing that we are trying to do at the moment. And what are the current yeshivot like in the various different Sephardic countries? That's what we're also concentrating on in this channel. So we're really trying to get a great breadth, let's just say, in of itself, of information and data on this. Now, friends, if you descend from any of these famous rabbonim, let me just put this on the over here in the camera so we can continue the video and continue chatting while we are here. If you descend from any of the famous rabbis that we are speaking about here in this series, please don't hesitate, send me an email. I would love to hear more information on the great Chachamim of yesteryear. Now, if anyone is interested in watching these videos, share these videos also to other people. We are now approaching a staggering 7,500 subscribers, which is a phenomenal achievement, friends. I don't think we could have done this. You know, I never thought we will get to this staggering amount of figure, respectively. And wishing you well. Please, everyone, subscribe. Be well. And Shavuot Barach. We just came out of Shabbat Parashat Kitavo, and only 10 days away, we are going to be in Rosh Hashanah. Just about 10 days ago. 10 days to come. So wishing you well. Thanks for spending time to watch, and please let me know if any of you had relatives that studied in the Alliance network and so on and so forth. So I'm just about to start driving now. Have a great day, and thank you for watching.